our kickoff event for Open Access Week, and so Open Access Week is an International Week of Action. This year's theme is Open in Action, and it's sort of highlighting what researchers, students, and people all over the world are doing to put open access into practice. So some of the ways that at Tech that you can put open access into practice is the Open Access Initiative, which is funding from the Office of the Vice President of Research to make publications, to publish them in open access journals where they might have an article processing fee. Several of our panelists have gotten that funding and were able to publish open access that way. Another way is to self-archive, and we can talk more about that. Another event that we're having that's sort of virtual this week is the Uploadathon, which is just sort of a drive for self-archiving in our digital archive called ThinkTech at Texas Tech. And if anyone has any questions about those things, you can contact me. My information's on the program. And also, that was the other thing I was going to say, is that you can contact me. I also do CV analyses, so if you're not really sure what kind of past publications you can self-archive, I can help you with that as well. We're having another event on the 28th, this Friday, in the afternoon to just sort of celebrate, sort of informal. There'll be presentations from the library about different services and different topics around open access, and there will be refreshments, so it's just kind of a party. To get started, I will introduce our panelists, and then I'll kind of allow you all to talk more about your research and anything that I don't mention. So Dr. Lauren Gollahon is faculty in the biology department. She specializes in diagnostics for breast cancer and has leadership experience with Texas Tech's obesity research cluster. Also, please correct me if something is wrong or if I say it incorrectly. Dr. Lou Densmore is faculty in the biology department. He specializes in crocodilian evolution, right? And has experience as a 2010 Texas Tech integrated scholar, department chair, and director of the Howard Hughes Medical Institute Science Education Program. Dr. Bruning and Vanna, you'll have to help me with your last name.
Chmielewski.
Uh-huh. Dr. Bruning and Vanna Chmielewski are in our Geosciences and Atmospheric Sciences department. Dr. Bruning is faculty, and Vanna is a Ph.D. candidate. Correct. And they study the weather, right? Okay. And we'll have them and a student of Dr. Densmore's kind of show how open access can be a topic in faculty and graduate and faculty-student advising kind of scenarios and relationships on research projects. And we have Dr. Michael Serra in the Psychological Sciences Department, who specializes in cognitive studies that focus on how students learn and study. So our first question is, how would you explain open access to someone who did not know what it was?
Okay, I'll start. So basically, if I were to explain open access to someone who had no idea what it was, I would start by discussing the need for being able to have peer-reviewed articles accessible to a broad range of people without without having to be the member of a specific group or have to purchase a membership or fee for a specific journal.
I think the other aspect of this is so important, the rapid turnaround. You can get, once ours was accepted on May 25th and it came out on June 9th. Okay, and that is in one of the foremost journals that is in fact open access. So I think that turnaround time is extremely important.
So the open access journal we published in was a sort of hybrid open access journal where there's a sort of add-on fee to make an article that would have been behind a paywall for some amount of time available immediately, as Dr. Densmore just described. And so, likewise, the goal there was to make that immediately available to our interested readers. Regardless of whether they had a subscription.
Our next question is, would you say you spend extra time and effort to make your work more open? Like, how much extra work is that sort of step as a part of the research?
I can tell you a lot of the journals in psychology that offer it, so kind of the hybrid model where they are still, published in print, but also available to paying members, society members, accessible if your university has access to that journal. A lot of those journals offer it where that's their standard model, but if you want to opt into making your article open access, you basically just have to pay a fee. At the time you go in and sign your copyright transfer, you can opt to pay a fee, make it open access. So it literally adds as much time as it takes you to type in your credit card number. So, and I don't know how different that is in other fields with those types of journals.
Well, I think I interpreted the question differently because in one sense, I think that you're going to do your science the same way regardless of where you're going to be publishing your data. So the same type of critical data interpretation and replications are going to be inherent, hopefully, regardless of where you publish. In terms of how much time, or if it takes more time, I think that depending on the open access requirements, they don't usually have restrictions in terms of pagination or with figures. So in that sense, you actually, I think, take less time because I don't have to pick what the take-home message in 4 figures is. Instead, I get to put in as many figures as I need to in order to convey that point. And so, time-wise, I think it's less.
What do you think, Sergio?
I think that, yeah, so working with these kind of journals, comparing with the other kind of journals that they are not open access, they are trying to facilitate the process. So the submission process, all that takes a lot of time, but they have that in such a way that is really practical. I think that in my case, in my experience, the tough part all the time is trying to get money to pay for that article. So I think that open access is something good because you know that your objective that is just share your knowledge will be accomplished because everyone has access for that. But the point is that you need to get money for that, so it's like a balance.
That kind of leads into the next question, which some of you sort of touched on, but how has the Open Access Publishing Fund affected the way that you publish? And kind of like, were you publishing differently before you found out about the fund? Do you think your process has changed, like, for the future?
And certainly in my case, it's been, it was in fact the same journal I had just recently published in, not open access. Again, because it's this hybrid model, it's simply whether or not I can find the funds to, which is sometimes several $1,000s,
Yep.
to make it open access. And so, that's the cost of another whole publication if I'm on a limited budget. And so the fund that was made available by the VPR was certainly helpful in making that happen.
I think it made the difference in where we published it.
Yeah, in our case, changed completely because we had this project, and we did this project 3 years ago. So the funds for that project per se were gone, and at the time that we were trying to publish, we had zero money. So we were like, okay, we can just publish in this kind of journal that they will be for free, or we can publish in open access, but we need money. So this just changed. So just gave us the possibility to publish there. So that was really useful.
An interesting caveat is that that happened earlier this year, that PLOS One published a paper that was incredibly highly criticized by the scientific community and by a lot of other people. And I actually think that we got a much more rigorous review in PLOS One than we would have gotten in one of our other journals that we would submit to, simply because they were covering themselves. They wanted to be sure that they had a formal apology and retracted this other paper, and I think it I think it wasn't as fast as it could have been for that specific reason, although it certainly was a lot faster than waiting on a regular journal.
For me, I'd like to add that the initiative funding was very helpful, because when you're between grants or when you're between funding and you still have data that you need to publish that is going to act as preliminary or seed money to demonstrate progress, this type of initiative funding becomes extremely important and supportive of the faculty in their research. So, and the other thing is, when you're thinking as a faculty member of promotion and tenure, one of the important factors is the H-index. And not only the impact factor of the journal, but how much your research is being referenced. And with open access, you almost guarantee that your H-index is going to rise, because it's going to open up the playing field for many more people to be able to access your research without either having to go through interdisciplinary library loans or to take 2 or 3 extra steps in order to get that, or to wait longer before it's released. So in that sense, being able to publish open access has not only benefits for faculty growth, but also for funding.
And I think relatedly, like just the whole open access thing, it really enables more of that interdisciplinary work. Like maybe you have some statistical model that you can use in your own research, but you aren't a member of any statistics societies or something like that. It's really helpful for that. Getting other people to actually care about the science that you did, where it might also apply.
What are some myths about open access that you originally thought were true, that now you don't think are true? If you can think of any.
Oh, I have one. Let me just say that initially, my expectation was that open access journals, not including the hybrid model, but others, have very generally low impact, and they had very low expectations in terms of peer review.
You sort of get that impression that if you can buy your way in, that it was going to be maybe things that aren't quite as good get through. But I think that certainly with PLOS, we found out that wasn't the case at all, because they worked us over pretty well.
And I think it's pretty evident that when you follow the impact factors of some of these journals that we publish in regularly that are open access, that their impact factors are increasing. Mm-hmm. And we all have had experience with understanding that the peer review is very critical, and it's not a given that you're going to get your publication in. So.
I think with the hybrid journal, they put us through the exact same peer review, and you choose later whether you want it to be open access or not. So it's the same process, and then later you check the box and enter in your credit card information again.
Yeah, I think that something important in the open access, or at least in my perspective, is like they just create an standardized way to assess everything. So that doesn't matter what journal are you trying to target. They follow the same process, and that helps a lot, because, for example, in our field we have some herpetological journals that they can take years to reply to you, and they don't follow.
Or at least it seems like years.
They don't follow the same process all the time. In these journals, you know that you have a limit time, and they have a limit time, and they are just spending all the resources to accomplish that. So that could be a really useful thing from open access journal.
I don't know if it's a myth, but I think the jury is still out on, the suggestion that you'll get more citations, certainly you get more readers. That one's hard to deny for an open access article versus not open access or behind a paywall, whatever. I think the data is still out on the citations. That might vary by field. I'm sure it varies by individual journal. So beyond impact factor, beyond H-index, the other, up and coming statistic is the journal index. You can get into +1, you're going to get a ton of citations, even if you probably just had a print copy. So I don't know, some studies where they've actually tried to randomly assign open access to articles in the same journal, they have found increases in readership, no increases in citations. So it's really hard to say, well, look at this journal. This is an open access journal. It got more readers, it got more citations. This one's closed access, has fewer readers, fewer citations. Is the article quality the same? Is the journal readership the same? Is the number of articles published the same? There's a lot of other factors that are not controlled for when you just compare so-called impact of open access journals to impact of not open access journals. So I don't know yet. That's a myth.
That's
or an open question.
I would say the jury's kind of out on that. There's a lot of studies that go on, especially more so right now that open access has been around for a while. And because of things like quality, the journal, like with one journal over the other, because those things vary, it does affect it. So it's not, I think now we're finding it's not just a blanket statement, but it is something that does happen.
Yeah, I like to think about it too from a reader experience perspective, regardless of how it impacts my own CV. I think about the way I like to read journal articles. I will go do a Google Scholar search or something like that first, and anything I can do to remove a barrier from having to go through a library,
No offense, Camille.
No offense, but
The paywall.
it's tough to compete with Google in terms of even just finding the article. I like to be able to send someone a DOI and have them pull that up, and then there's the article, and it's just like browsing the web, and it's not layered with another extra system they have to go through. So that's more of, it matches my ideals for how I want my research to be shared. Because I could certainly put a PDF, it wouldn't be peer reviewed up on a website, but I could guarantee that everyone could see my work. That's very easy to do now.
And I think one thing that we have to take into consideration is as this new generation of scientists becomes developed, they're in a generation that is much more immediate and in terms of direct access and not having to worry about going through the paywall or other iterations. And whereas I think that you still have those of us who are baby boomers who have, of which I am also, but who have, I think, a little bit more patience in terms of being able to get an article. And so there's this technology trend that is going to have to be addressed at some point.
Related, I don't know if it applies to myths, but it's related to what you just said. Not only is there perhaps a generational or whatever difference in how soon people want information, there's an upcoming problem that we're all going to have to face as a field or fields, which is newer generations, even in this country, don't care so much about copyright. They don't care so much about paywall. I am shocked when I ask my students, when I discuss plagiarism type stuff with them as a class, and I would say, you would never, for example, go into a store if there were DVDs and steal a DVD, right? And they would say, never, if DVDs existed. But would you go online and download a movie off a torrent? Of course, I do that all the time. How is that any different? It's free. So it's also becoming like almost a conceptual difference of, I can charge for my stuff, but I can also steal whatever I want and not have to. Why should I have to pay?
Right.
So I think that's, also going to be a growing question. And maybe scientists won't fall prey to that in the future, but that whole so-called generation is going to be opposed to paying for anything.
Right. And that segues into self-archiving, right?
Mhm.
Because if you have an article that's behind a paywall, you have a strict copyright time frame before you're able to release that, whether it's through ResearchGate or even if it's on your own website. So, going back to what you said, I think that there are it's not taken into consideration as seriously as it should be.
And that's an area of work where I'll do consultations and things like that about copyright or questions like that for all sorts of different things, because a lot of people are used to the idea that if it's there, if I see it, then I can have it and I can use it, and that can be detrimental, kind of for use, but also like we were talking about with sort of that's in the sort of concept of how flexible or inflexible something is. Knowing that is really important for the publication process, but just being aware of it. So at Tech, there is an initiative to communicate globally, and last year's Open Access Week theme was everywhere. So can you share any examples of communities outside of Tech that are impacted by open access, or by your work specifically, where you had readership, like you're talking about, that you didn't expect or that you don't think you would have had in a non-open access journal?
Well, I guess I can give a couple examples from the work that we were doing, where we put together a tool to simulate some of the instrumentation we use. And because of what we were offering through Tech, we were able to publish it open access as well. And since then, it's been used by researchers in Georgia and for development of a new system going on down in Argentina. So people have been able to use the tool more readily than they might have been able to otherwise.
If you don't have like personal examples, just sort of any sort of case that you might have heard, or just like the idea that it could be used more globally.
I really think the paper that we published would not have had nearly the readership yet, and it was a novel paper for a novel, at least a novel approach that Sergio has essentially come up with, and because of that, we wanted to get it out there to as many people as possible. And again, I think you get limitations when you go through society sometimes, unless it's science or nature. And part of the problem is that this paper is relatively long and relatively detailed, and you can't always do that in some of the really high impact journals. They just won't publish it if it's that long. So this took a long time to synthesize and get together, and we needed to get it into a place where it would get out quickly because it was now important for a number of other people.
And I think that one plus of this open access initiative is, like, for example, we are working in the tropics. So we are working in a lot of countries. I'm from Colombia. We are working in a lot of places that they don't have this ability to get to be part of all these associations or societies to get all the information right away. So this information is important because this was in Panama, this project. So they need the information, be available in order to take decisions. All the decision takers need the information. But if we publish in some of these other journals that they just block the information for a defined time or forever, if you are not part of the society, we are not accomplished the idea. So because we are doing a basic science, but we are doing also applied science, conservation. So that information needs to be available. And I think that these journals and these open access help to do that.
Okay. Would you say most of your colleagues publish open access?
I would say it depends on how much money they have available and how they rate the impact of the data that they have.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you can have the quality, so the data is really good and you are discovering new things, but because money limitations, you need to choose other kind of journals because just budget. So that I think that in our field, for example, in herpetology, people in general try to target herpetological journals because they are part of the societies, and the fee is really low, like $50. So it's easy to be involved and get papers on herpetology.
But by data, I want to make a caveat, and that is, you may assess your data as being important, and if you think that it's paradigm shifting, you may want to get it out very quickly, and you may have a better chance. It may be a myth, I may be going back to that, but I think you have a better chance of doing that in a journal that is generally newer and is open access versus a much higher impact, more established, expensive journal, because of the restrictions of being able to rationalize what that paradigm shift is and demonstrating the data for it.
Okay. Where do you see research at Tech in the next few years concerning open access, concerning volume, or just sort of the newer things that are coming out, and how Tech is embracing or not embracing or participating in those sort of initiatives?
It's definitely we're going in that direction. It's going to have to, there'll be more and more high quality open access. I feel very, very sure about that. And everyone knows or everyone that's been here for just a year or two knows that there's a push to increase research funding, all of those things that come along with it. And so I think that really we're going to have to grow into, whether some of us like it or not, but grow into the mode of publishing open access. And I think that as long as you're doing it in something that's high quality, and you know that's high quality, and I want to commend the folks in Dustin's group, because they demand that the place where you publish is part of accredited organization of open access. And because of that, you are much more likely to get a high quality product, I think.
Yeah, I think the faculty will probably provide the leadership needed to go in that direction as they see their individual communities going that route as well. And so at some level, the institutional push won't be necessary. But I think the thing about this open access fund, and I think you touched on this earlier, is that it in a lot of these restricted funding type situations, it's a very small gesture, budgetarily perhaps for the university, but it really removes that barrier to the faculty doing what would best fit with their disciplinary communities. And then that feeds back onto Tech's national reputation in terms of being a top tier player in whatever research endeavor.
Do you think that the tenure and promotion process should reward open access?
Let's start with me. Yes.
Well, of course, but I'm not sure it should be rewarded significantly more than anything else. I mean, I think what you're trying to do is get high quality research published. And if you get high quality research published in open access, that's great. If you get it in closed access, that's fine too. It really, I don't think that particularly will drive the bus, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I think there's a whole constellation of factors that play into that evaluation, many of which are, even departmentally specific.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think quality is always going to trump specific methods, but if you can do quality and the method, then why not, look more favorably on that.
Yeah.
As a student, I don't know if I really have a place to say anything on here.
Plant the seed now so that maybe one day you get tenure. I mean, I agree. I don't see why quality would ever trump, like you guys said, methodology or mode. I mean, even like in my field, like we highly value journal articles. We really don't value books. If someone puts out a really great book, though, that's going to count a lot more than if they put out a really unsuccessful book. So, what's the difference how they wrote the book,
What would you tell aspiring scholars, such as graduate students or even undergrads, about open access?
I don't think that we have to say very much because we all teach upper division classes or classes in which students have to look at the literature, and they regularly go to the open access journals. And so in terms of saying anything in specific, I don't think it's the journal and whether it's open access per se as much as we've been saying, the quality of the data to get it published.
We're preaching to the choir. I mean, they're the ones that are teaching us, actually, which is why I think you should comment on whatever you think you need to, because I'll learn something, I know.
I mean, when I teach undergraduate courses that I expect my students to actually read articles in, research methods, my specialty course in cognition, for example, I require them to find on their own and read and write about actual research articles. So open access is quite beneficial to my students because, certainly most of them know how to access articles and whatever that they would only have access through because they're here. But it's real easy to show them how to use Google Scholar, and not only to find those, but by default it finds open access articles and other, self-archived articles as well quite easily. But it's very useful. It's very useful for even when I just want to show an example of how to organize a research article or how to read a research article. I don't have to have it prepared. I might think to do this on the fly. I just open up Google, go to Google Scholar. I can easily find real high quality journal articles that were published open access. I can open them up right on the screen. I can send them out by email. I can use them as learning materials, not just for their content, but for their general content. So it's beneficial, for other learning too.
I think from the student perspective, I mean, it was a real simple thing to figure out. If I'm working at a coffee shop trying to look up something, I can access these ones, I can't access these ones, I'll look at these first. So trying to then publish, it makes sense to at least try to do one of those that, people will be able to read from the coffee shop.
And I think that the faculty in general have, I guess I should say, I have come a long way because one example is about 8 or 10 years ago, I had a class and it had a seminar. I had a seminar portion, and I was with my graduate students, and I said, "Okay, give me an article that you're going to be using, and we'll talk about it." And one of my students at the time pulled up an article that he had found on the internet, and I said, "I don't want this kind of article. I want a real article, one that is it's been peer reviewed, and we know for sure that it's got good quality." And so, coming from that very closed-minded point of view to the present, I think is a testament to how open access and availability, as well as critical peer review, have all evolved, like Lou was saying.
I sort of fell into this because we also published a book just recently, and the book now, each chapter can be downloaded individually for a fee from Elsevier. And Elsevier is anything but reasonable, but in terms of what they charge, but it's still, you can do it chapter by chapter, which I thought was really a way to sort of circumvent a lot of the problems that people have with buying a whole book that's going to cost.
What has changed about how you do research because of open content? Like you kind of what you were saying about you're at the coffee shop and you can get to one article without any sort of obstacle as opposed to the other kind of article. So how has that changed sort of what you look at when you're doing your research?
Well, I guess from my perspective, open access has been around for as long as I've been doing research, so I can't say anything's really changed from my perspective. But it'll change what I do where, but in terms of what type of research I'm doing, it doesn't impact that at all. Like, I'm still doing the same research. It's just the background study might be done, piecewise that otherwise might not have been the case.
I think that we can say that the accessibility is just the key point here, that when you're trying to do research and develop research and trying to learn how to do research, you need to read high quality papers in order to follow those steps. In general, we learn science by imitation. We just check out a cool paper, say like, oh, this is good, I want to do that, and you continue and just create new ideas. So these open access just give you the opportunity to get these high quality papers in a coffee shop. No, you don't need to be at the university because at Tech, because the library, you can get everything, but you're at home and you want to open something and will be, charged. So I think that was the plus, the pro of these kind of papers and journals.
The other takeaway might be that we end up working weirder hours than we might have otherwise, because obviously we're working not at work on these research things.
I think that it's changed, not in the sense of critically interpreting and reproducing your data, but in terms of the way that you approach the question. Because Lou and I can attest to the fact that when we were in grad school and we were young assistant professors, it was very linear. It was what you found in the library or in the different journal articles without having this global scope of what is out there. And so by having this new global scope, the question now becomes different. I think that it's more, what is the mechanism of action? How can we decipher how these things are interacting together in biology versus just describing a characteristic. And so it's gone past observational into something that I think is more in depth. And so for the up and coming scientists, the questions are going to be different from the ones that we initially started out answering.
And I did want to say that you can access closed access or limited access publications off campus. And there's a way you can set up your computer and everything to do that, just in case people don't know.
I've done that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's time consuming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have this other connection that you want to keep alive and you don't want to kill that to log on to the library.
Well, it works, it
Yeah,
works.
it does work.
They want access and they want it now.
Some of us are just impatient.
And I think this is also an advising challenge, and I guess you could call it a self-advising challenge as well, to make sure that I'm still paying attention to that literature that now seems much more closed. And so it's impacted my work in having to make sure that I leave time to go explore the 3 or 4 seminal papers from the 1940s and build in enough lead time to where I can still get those papers. It's perhaps unfortunate that it does lead to this sort of two-tiered readiness of access situation. It's maybe not as much of a problem for a journalist who wants to stay up on what's hot. It's great for them, but I sometimes have to push graduate students, company accepted, to actually go far enough back to actually see the foundations of the field and understand the whole historical sweep of what it is that we're working on.
Do you think a space to regularly discuss publishing trends would be beneficial to tech? Do you feel that there's enough kind of discussion going on about these new things that are happening in the publishing field?
I mean, I think what we've done is when we found out about the fund, okay, I immediately went to a number of my colleagues and said, there's a fund out there, that can help you for publishing in higher quality open access. And I think that has made a difference, you know, because most of us had no clue at all. I mean, I think the program has only been around a little over a year. And because of that, I think it really made a big difference to me and also to several other colleagues that we have in biology.
And in our case, for example, we were aware of this initiative because the editor of Plus One emailed us and said because I emailed he was asking for an amount of money, so please a discount because we don't have that money, and he said but your university has a grant for that, and was I asked Lou look at, do we have that? Do we? I don't know. And we started people, and yeah, we have that. So that was interesting. But we get that from an external source. It was not
Right.
someone from the university talking about it.
How did you find out about that? Because you told me.
I don't know if I luckily read one of the tech announces that mentioned it, or if it was a thing from the VPR that wound up in my inbox that advertised it, but yeah, I'm not sure actually.
Okay.
It may have been because I was looking for other sources of funding for other needs that I had, and I came across that. I think that's what happened. So very accidental, very much similar, yeah.
Serendipitous, to say the least.
So I think what they're all saying is yes, in that sense. Knowing about these opportunities in a more formal way would be good.
And I think this goes beyond open access, because certainly as long as you're doing this across discipline, some disciplines are probably ahead of other disciplines on various things, not just open access, open data, pre-registration, meta-analysis, all these other things that are maybe seemingly up and coming in one field and they're old hat in another, and they're unheard of in a third field.
Mm-hmm.
So especially here, we're at a major research university, you have editors, you have associate editors on the faculty. So the more conversations that go on across discipline, the faster the other disciplines can catch up. I'm not saying we're in the lead, we're probably not. But I think it's beneficial.
Yeah, I think maybe the hazard with part of what I'm not sure if I'm interpreting what you're saying quite correctly, but the hazard is that a lot of us are time constrained. I think that's a universal thing, and so there's more opportunities already than we can take of in terms of workshops to learn about what it means to publish open access as a sort of general teaching thing. So I don't know that I have a solution to disseminate the information better, but I think you kind of touched on it, that it's within collegial relationships within the university and making sure the word can spread that way. That will be a big part of it.
Does anyone in the audience have any questions?
The students were talking about accessing open access documents. What about your work? Do you have any objection to making it open access when you're done? Your thesis, your dissertation?
Well, in our case, we try all the time to make open access everything. And for example, this data for this paper in PLOS, one requirement was that. And I think that is useful. We need to be careful in the way that we just make available everything, because maybe you can just continue working with the data for a while, right?
Yeah.
But I think that we should just target in that direction and put everything available, because it's the way that you can realize if someone is making the data or someone is just saying something real. Mm-hmm. So if we are into a topic and we want to validate the information or test the information, we should see the paper and we should see the data. So I like this kind, for example, PLOS, because they update the data and they update the paper. So you can just go and check those.
I find that a lot of students are hesitant to make their work open access based on the advisement of their faculty. So how do you feel as faculty members about open access of your students' work?
Are you talking about just the thesis and dissertation, or do you mean?
Thesis and dissertation.
Well, I I have known colleagues that have put embargoes on the students'
Right.
theses because the quality of the writing was not up to a standard that the faculty felt comfortable with having it released.
I have seen that happen also.
And then on the other side of that is that the student may not have had the chance to be able to finish publishing the data. And you don't want to give that student a disadvantage of having somebody who's farther advanced in the same field pick that up and run with it. So you put a year embargo or something like that on it to give them a chance.
Something at least reasonable in time-wise, I think is it, and it also depends on the students. Okay, many finish their theses or dissertations, and those things are now going to be published. There are also students who are publishing the whole time they're going through, and those obviously would be much more likely to have open access early. But you, like Lauren's right, you don't want your student to get scooped under any set of circumstances.
And there are cases that there may be patents
Yeah.
and IP that need to be protected until it's been accredited.
I have some departments that want to embargo for 20 years. I don't.
Enough time for the professor to retire and then
Or
be
die.
away.
But yeah, quality is a concern. I do see some that I think the quality is low, and I think it would be embarrassing if they were
Just
published
cut
at
loose.
that particular time. But what I also like to tell my students is, this is not the end of your career, this is the beginning of your career. And so many of them think, okay, this is my pinnacle, I've reached it. And that's not true. So they can keep working on it and then submit it for publication. But a lot of them just don't feel that way. I don't know, it's almost like they think they're going to get rich off this one dissertation or something.
Well, in almost every case, certainly in the sciences, when you get a Ph.D., you've learned how to do science or how to be a contributor in the field that you're in. Now, it is your responsibility for the rest of your life to be a contributor
Right.
and to do science.
I was taught that scholarship means sharing.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I agree.
Unfortunately, it's a pretty small percentage of people that publish more than 5 papers out of their dissertation, depending on the field. But they'll publish their dissertation, and then after that, it's not a lot of publications that come out. And it also depends upon what they're doing. If they're working in industry, obviously that's a totally different world.
Sure.
If they're at a junior college teaching, that's a totally different world. But that certainly, if you end up at a university, that's just the expectation. It can continue on.
Are there any other questions?
I have to leave, sorry.
Okay.
Thank you, Sergio.
Eric, were you going to say something?
I guess I'll mention that I have a sort of unique situation with an NSF award I have right now. One of the things we wrote into that was doing a lot of our software development in version-controlled repositories and in a way that's a sort of fundamentally open orientation to the entire process, and so that would include all of the data then as well. A lot of that's ongoing work in the group. We have it's kept private for now, but the whole goal is eventually to open that up, and I think that's I feel some responsibility to do that as someone who's receiving federal funding, that the public's already paid for this research, and it's important that the public receive the benefit of it by being able to access it. So,
What do you anticipate the turnaround will be on that, ultimately, before most all of it's released?
well, let's see. Part of it was released as part of the paper that we published, Open
Okay.
Access, which is part of the
Sure.
the thing is, we have this tool that we shared with the community,
Sure.
but they can't read the paper that describes it yet. It
Yeah.
seems a little asymmetric.
Yeah.
I would imagine it's probably on the order of a year or
That's
no
what-
later than the
Yeah,
grant
okay.
ending, that
Yeah.
sort of thing. Yeah,
That's kind of what I was.
it's a deliverable.
Yeah, right.
Doesn't NIH require, if you have their funding, that you have to make your research accessible to everyone? So depending on what your funding source is also going to drive that.
And now it's not just NIH, there are several agencies that have began doing that and mandating that in their grant requirements.
Good luck getting the data if you want it, but I mean, and that's just you know, that's cultural. That you can say, hey, can I see this data? Can I see your statistical analyses? And a lot of people still have the mindset of, no, it's mine. If you really want it that badly, go get a court order, and then I'll give it to you. And you'll probably never get that far. But as the culture continues to change, I think you're going to see more and more people taking your approach, which is, no, I fully expect and agree that it should be public and that I should cooperate. And, you know, it was mentioned earlier about having, you know, larger, you know, public data, public scripts for the analyses that were done, all that stuff. You know, I think that one will continue to change in the positive direction. So,
Are there any final last things any of the panelists want to say? Okay, well, thank you all for coming. We'll wrap up for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah. We appreciate you allowing us to do this.